afternoon. We are starting our working week from the discussion on the fuel price. Most people believe that that's too high, and we will try to find out why it is so, what are the components of the fuel price, and also one of the key questions: can we trust the prices which we see at gas stations, especially because the Prime Minister was talking about the collusion of the traders. We will try to find out what's happening now. Our guests are Mr. Kulikovich, Vadim Zaporozhchenko, Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry, Sergei Kuyun, Director of 895 Consulting Group. I would like to ask you to start from a very simple question: what's happening in the market of price formation, and then there might be questions or discussion between the guests. Good afternoon. I would like to start from a brief presentation which demonstrates what are the prices at the fuel market. This is very brief presentation, but it is full of information. Here you can see that the scheme of the market of diesel fuel consists of two major segments: the domestic fuel and imported fuel. You see that imported fuel takes 80% of the market, and the domestic fuel about 20%. Talking about regional networks, they can be distributed in such a way. We have 6,400 gas stations in Ukraine. The gas stations which are mostly use the imported fuel. These are our brand gas stations like Ami, Coco, Vogue, Shell, Sakar. They take about 45% of the market. But those who use only domestic fuel, that's 30%, and there are some operators which sell the mixed product. We know that the import component in the market demonstrates that we depend on prices which are formed outside of Ukraine. That's the situation with the import of fuel, of refinery products as of 2015. We see that we import from Belarus, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Russia, Bulgaria, and other. This the share of the segment influences the market which forms the price. Now, I would like to draw your attention to how these shares changed this year. In the first quarter of 2016, most of the fuel comes from Belarus. And that is because the price competition is very aggressive. But these are some general factors. the main of them, the main factors that influence the price is the price of oil, Brent, also taxation, and the change in exchange rate. It's when we're talking about imported fuels. Let's look at what's happening to refinery products. The upper graph is the price of Brent, which started growing up from February. The second one is the price of A95. In Ukraine, we see that when the price for oil goes down, our A95 was quite stable, but when the price went up, it went up simultaneously with it. And the price for diesel fuel, which reflects more the graph of the price of Brent. This is the dynamic of retail prices compared to European quotes for diesel fuel and A95. A95 does not correspond fully the movement of prices at European quotes. And the government of Ukraine organized the investigation as to the possible collusion of the participants of the market. You can see that that's the slide from Australia. The dynamic of the change of prices. The upper graph is price of oil, and the lower one is the retail price. There, both graphs move simultaneously. In our case, this is not so. So the case was filed, which is now at the final stage of investigation. I would also like to mention that the parallel behavior means the change of price, which is simultaneous in time and in similar proportion. And the establishing similar prices when there are no objective reasons. These are all the factors of parallelism. That's the phenomena which is called rockets and feathers. When prices for oil go up, the prices for gasoline also go up. But when the prices go down, then the prices for fuel go down much slower, like a feather. And so that's briefly our vision of the market of refinery products. First of all, that's A95, 92 and diesel fuel. Thank you. One clarification. When do we expect to hear the decision of the committee? In the nearest future, but you understand that the procedure of decision-making is quite formalized. Now the investigation is over. The participants of the market, which are included into the investigation, they received the preliminary conclusions. Now we receive the answers from them, then we analyze their replies, and then the decision will be made. I cannot tell you about the exact time frame. We may say it will take a month, but it may last for a month and a half in the nearest future. Let's put it this way. Okay, thank you. Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry. The question is to you. how can the government control such issues?
Good morning, dear participants. Currently, the active legislation does not allow the state to impose neither wholesale nor retail prices in the fuel market. So this is the market, and the prices are established by the retailers. Actually, each price in the market with each retailer or wholesaler should be different. Also, refineries depend on taxes, tax burden, and operational costs. Also on retailers, retailers' price should cover logistics aspects, the petrol station network maintenance cost, etc. As of today, looking at the fuel market, we authorized our expert and analytical group to review prices in the market, to calculate model prices in a wholesale market and retail market. So these are recommended prices developed by the analysts, by the ministry, and based on the change of oil price in the market. And then we present results of our work to the wholesalers. As for retailers, consumers in the retail market can choose depending on price. We have brand petrol stations, so-called majors, who support the offer at a higher price, like 23-25 now for petrol, and around 20 for diesel fuel. And there are also minor petrol stations which offer prices 2-3 hryvnias lower. As for communication with all these companies, we had established a special working, we have developed the draft resolution about creating a working group which will study the prices. It will be like an analog of our expert analytical group, but it will have higher powers since it will be officially established body. It will comprise the experts and then market analysts. The question about recommended price, whether people can know it and just to know. So also you mentioned that it is possible to find lower prices in petrol stations, -2, -3 hryvnia. Who control the quality of fuel in that station? As for recommended prices, that they are posted on the website of our ministry. As for the quality control in the gasoline stations, we have instead of the state consumer inspection, which we used to have in the past, and which controlled the quality of products and technical parameters of products. Now it is reorganized into state food consumption service, and this is their responsibility to control the quality. So Mr. Serhiy Kuyun, director of A95 Consulting, the representative of Ministry of Energy. I've been always saying that Ukrainian market should be one of the most competitive markets in Europe. If you look at the number of market players, for example, in Turkey, they have just around 90 big players, and while in Ukraine we have more than 100 networks, not to mention smaller chains possessing between 10 and 50 gasoline stations. Actually, the competition in this market should be high in Ukraine. This is non-typical gasoline market if we compare it with Europe. How do we analyze the adequacy of this market? Of course, there is expert analytical group. There are the ministry calculations and analysis. While we do analysis in different way, we take the prices from the European Union, the retail prices from the European Union, and observe dynamics of that prices, and then compare it against the dynamics with Ukrainian prices. Why this is possible? This is possible because we have purely European model of gasoline supplies, but unlike Belarus and Russia, we have different pricing system. As for the level of prices, the prices in Ukraine, if we take them tax-free, if we look at European prices, our gasoline prices are the same as they are in Europe if we take them without taxes. Actually, we buy the same fuel from Europe at the same prices, from Poland, from Lithuania, from Belarus, at the prices which are very close, very similar to the wholesale prices in Europe. But at the petrol station, at the gasoline station, the prices are different. In Europe, somewhere prices are higher because the taxes in Europe are higher. Then, if you look at the dynamics of prices, the change of prices, well, if you look at that, we also find out that they are the dynamics is the same as in Germany, as in Southern Europe, in Central Europe. Of course, maybe we do not respond in our price change immediately like in Australia. I do not know about Australia, but we respond similarly as they do in Lithuania. When the gasoline carrier arrives, leaves the fuel hub, and then goes to the petrol station. But Lithuania is a small country, and retailers do not have huge storages. They just sell the fuel which arrives immediately. While in Ukraine, there is a small time lag for storing. We need to have storages because we are a large country. Actually, Ukrainian market, both in terms of the price values and both in the dynamics of prices, market prices, is absolutely coherent with the European market. As for the premium margins of OCA, WOG, etc., prices which are under close monitoring of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. But there is more than 4 other cheaper petrol stations which do not belong to that big gasoline stations. There are some cheaper gasoline stations which sell Ukrainian gasoline. Actually, that big chains of gasoline stations, they have just 20% of the market. For example, Sakar company has around 1% of the market. It's funny to say that they breach some anti-monopoly rules. Speaking about the Anti-Monopoly Committee, I like the slogan, competition brings flourishing, and I think that the main function of the Anti-Monopoly Committee is to ensure fair competition. The situation in the market now is not as good as it should be. There are cases frequent cases of poor quality. There are scandals just as about Ukernafta when the state donated to the private company. So this competition is distorted, while that company possessed 30% of the market. So is the competition fair? How could we say? So those big chains which bring imported product, which pay high taxes, which are leaders in the market, they are under continuous attention of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. It's easy to monitor them. They're leaders of the market. They're big companies. They are easy to be monitored. But those who are in the shadow, who sell poor quality products, who exist with governmental support, so those companies, they are considered to be good companies, but they do not pay taxes. These companies should be subject to close monitoring from the government. They should be the taxes should be tracked, the quality of the product should be tracked. Look at the policy of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. The diesel fuel behaves more in European like style, and the biggest problems we have with gasoline. Why this is that way? That because in diesel fuel we have the we have much less problems. With gasoline, we have a huge excise duty, and here the situation is very bad because there were huge exemptions. There is big shadow market here. And here we observe that the market do not respond when the prices go down.
So you mentioned that there's a very good, expensive gasoline and also some mixture which is very low in quality and low in price. How do you distinguish, but also sometimes high in price? So basically there should be some laboratory, because otherwise you cannot find out which of this fuel is of bad quality. Now the people are trying to make quite a good product. The car can even drive using it, but the problem is there are no taxes. There's no 50% taxes which gasoline has. Okay, I have to answer the questions. There were many messages given here. First of all, and the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine is the state authority. According to the Constitution, it acts in accordance with its powers. Why I say that? Why I remind that? And that is because the Anti-Monopoly Committee is a body which has as the main task to monitor the competition in the market. When we are talking about some illegal gas stations, some smuggled gasoline, this is the zone of responsibility of other state authorities, Security Service, Ministry of Energy and Coal Industry, and others. The committee registers only the facts of violating competition. At the same time, when the prices are changed at the same time, when the participants of the market act simultaneously, they distort the competition this way. So 20% of the market lead 80% of the market. That's what you want to say? I believe, as a rule, the leader starts, and within several days others follow. That's the trend. And that is what causes attention. And we started analyzing. The price 21 or 20.99 is the same of different participants of the market who have different logistic. Each one has similar, it has different economics, but the price changes simultaneously. That is what causes our attention. There are examples when some participants of the market participated in such actions, but then they started implementing their own pricing policy. They left this so-called cartel. As to other segments of the market, we examine the activity in the market as well. We cannot promote our activity on investigation before the case is filed. Basically, only then we can disclose information. So if we were convinced that everyone who sells fuel sells a good quality fuel, would that address the problem? Would that mean that we do have the real competition? I can tell you, the shadow gasoline should also correspond to the standards, but you can sell it cheaper. But that's unfair competition. If there were no shadow market, then only this competition could have been working for the benefit of people. Talking about unfair competition, Anti-Monopoly Committee has the powers, its own powers. If you say that there is some gas station which has no owner, no address, no product, we don't have any instrument to influence them, because that is that falls under the activity of law enforcement bodies. So you cannot fight shadow economy. Let's then kill the 20% of the civilized market, because you have powers for that. Tell me, in the last years, when did the committee apply serious sanctions to your segment? Investigations, they say you react slowly. That is what we are blamed in. Don't speak altogether. You say we don't like similar prices. I was in Portugal in December. You go along the highway. There's a huge table and the list of gas stations for the next 50 kilometers and prices. Similar, same. Everyone has the same price. It's not something unusual for this business. It's 20% of the market that sells same product. They buy it at the same price. You know that the purchase price is this. The purchase price formula is the same. Why should they have different price? Why it is the same in Europe? Why in our case it should be different? And it changes. They change it altogether. Same minute. I have just returned from the US, and there every gas station has different price. Because they know if they had the same price, then Anti-Monopoly Committee would come to them. In Europe, the situation is different. But basically, you are saying it's similar. The logistic is similar. Every company has its own economics, has own costs for salaries. There are no similar companies.
Then, if you mention the foreign experience, then I would remind you that in such cases which you provided as an example, the anti-monopoly bodies immediately file cases. An example of Canada. In some provinces in Canada, the the authorities sets minimal and maximal prices once in 3 years. This is regulated market. In Middle Asia, they have the coordinated prices between prices and gasoline station and the wholesale prices on gasoline products. we have free market, not regulated market. We have to respond to all distortions in competition. Moreover, we have not reacted yet. We are just investigating the case. We have not made the decision yet. Probably the market participants will prove that they the logistics costs the same. The group, the interagency group which you mentioned, which has to be established upon cabinet decision, whether this group will be able to resolve the issue of shadow turnover and tax evasion. The group which is now in process of establishing, it will be advisory group under the Cabinet of Ministers. It will advise about changes to legislation aimed at improving the market operation, including tax evasions, including poor quality, including smuggled gasoline. But which body in the government will be responsible for putting an end to all these violations, SBU or fiscal service or customs service or whoever? If the case will be with the tax evasion, this will be the fiscal service. The criminal code provides for specific areas of responsibility and for specific punishment. Those structures which have to monitor the shadow turnover, whether they are competent enough, how do you think? We observe some improvements in administration of excise, in administering of excise duty. This year, the new automated controlling system was launched, and we observe the improvements. Of course, this did not remove the fake gasoline from the market and all the evasions, but nevertheless, the life became harder for that offenders. Sometimes you can see a tanker with a sign propan-butan, but they sell gasoline without any documents, and since this tanker has no documents, the tax service cannot bring it to responsibility. So those who sell without any documents, they are not punished at all, because there is no documents to bring them to responsibility. Alexander Grechko, Union.